Tim Hasselbeck back with us to talk AFC as the game we will have on ESPN and ABC. The Chiefs, significant favorites, the 1 seed, the Arrowhead Invitational. They welcome the Texans, who beat the Chargers. And then the game that feels like everyone wanted, as Coach McDermott said, now we get the matchup of presumptive MVP candidates in the NFL. And let's get to this game that Buffalo won today and what Buffalo did that most impressed you. And they didn't have to ride 17.
No, not at all. They ran the football. They ran 72 plays in this game, Scott. So for context, like Denver ran 42, and they just ran the ball. Like that was one of the ways you're able to do that. Get an extra offensive lineman in there. You just run outside zone, and when you do that, and they didn't hide it. It wasn't like, hey, we have a limited menu with an extra offensive lineman in there. We're just going to continue to run the ball down your throat. And then it's power football. And I think this is important. This is a power run to the open side, which means away from the tight end. You're going to get a great kick-out block. And just look at this downhill run, for Cook. Like, he's not getting touched until well into the third level of the defense. And I just think it's important because Sean McDermott had talked seemingly like year after year. We got to stop relying so much on Josh. Got to stop relying so much on him. But then you'd look at the box score and be like, well, you ran him 17 times and you ran your running back 9 times. You are still relying on him. Mm-hmm. That's not the case now. Like, there's balance in their offense. They're running the football. Joe Brady's done a good job of creating that balance and calling plays that matter in terms of that balance, and it's mattered.
42 minutes very nearly time of possession. That's an outrageous statistic. And what's so interesting about Baltimore and Buffalo is it's Jackson and Allen, and it's the MVP conversation. And for whoever loses, then you're going to add another page to that they lose before the AFC Championship game. So that's going to happen by definition. Yep. And while they'll be the talking points all week long, is it maybe a different element of the offense that you think this game comes down to?
I think it's this right there. It's the run game and that. And I'm not to say that, hey, whoever wins time of possession is going to win the football game. But these teams now, look, you have to deal with the quarterbacks. But if you're going to play the Ravens, you got to deal with 22. Derrick Henry, I think, is the starting point for that offense right now at this point in the year, especially if you're going against Josh Allen. And I think when you flip it over, it's a very similar thing. You don't want the headache of that offense. Well, 42 minutes of time of possession like you did in the wild card round, that's the best way to defend those guys.
Excuse me.
Listen, this is going back into like Bill Parcells football of like, hey, run the ball, time of possession, that type of thing. Uh-huh. And we're not, thinking of it this because it's like MVP candidate. But like the best way to defend them is to not have them on the field. And I think both teams are kind of built to try to win the game that way.
And look, maybe it's boring. We talked about it earlier. If you can run and play defense, that wins playoff football games. And the winner of that game, obviously, will meet the winner of Kansas City and Houston. Houston's played and they've won. Kansas City's essentially been resting for a while now. And you've got Mahomes, who's trying to win 3 in a row, and this Chiefs team that is. But it's the other side of the ball that you want to focus on for the Chiefs. Why?
Yeah. Well, and I would just say this, too, on the resting point, to bring that up, that's been Andy Reid's thing back when he was in Philadelphia. Right. So, the idea of rust that people were talking about with Hurts, I think is a non-factor Chiefs-wise because that's just what they do. Mm-hmm. But it's their defense that also, I think, is the key in the way they'll rush the passer. Mm-hmm. When you look at, the way that the Chargers played against the Texans, listen, C.J. Stroud was under a lot of pressure, under a lot of heat. And we talked about it all year long about how the Chiefs really felt like a defensive-led team because Steve Spagnuolo did such a good job of blitzing protections. Well, they have a personnel issue up front. Now, all of a sudden, you throw into the mix that you're going to get some of these exotic blitzers and get free runners. To me, that's really, I think, why the line is the way it is. It's not this offense that we're going to get because the defense for Houston's pretty good.
That's what I was going to, and I don't have time for another question, just as a thought, like that Houston defense got after Herbert yesterday. And the one thing that Kansas City struggled up front is to keep Mahomes upright. Like if Houston has a chance in that game, I think it's going to have to be because they're going to have to get him on the ground.
Defensive score, steal a possession.
They did it yesterday. They did totally flip the game around. All right, Tim Hasselbeck, as always, appreciate your time. Look forward to talking divisional weekend next weekend. All right, on the way out, it's one big thing about one of our own. A tip of the cap, and it's well-deserved. Awaits the winner of the Monday night game, which has been moved to Arizona due to the fires in Los Angeles between the Rams and the Vikings. We do our research on that game. It'll be just the second playoff game since the merger, with both coaches yet to turn 40. Sean McVay was involved in the other one as well when he and the Rams beat Zach Taylor and the Bengals in Super Bowl 56. Minnesota, the best passing attack on deep balls this season. Sam Darnold led the league in QBR, completions, and completion percentage on throws at least 20 yards downfield. Rams defense bottom 5 on touchdowns allowed on deep throws. So maybe a good on bad matchup there. We'll see. It'll also be a rematch from Week 8 when the Rams handed the Vikings one of their 3 losses. That was a Thursday night game. Matthew Stafford spectacular in that one. That's where they got Puka back, and that's not something Minnesota knew was going to happen. They were able to limit the pressures as well. Tom Hasselbeck is back with us, and we've talked so much about Darnold this year, and so much of it was good. And the most recent memory we have was the one real poor game he had, which was last week against Detroit, which is why they have to go on the road and play here. What's been the biggest factor in the success, though, that he had during this year?
I think it goes along with the research you just were talking about. You know, they've been able to push the ball down the field. Do they have amazing receivers? Yes. But they've protected him so well. To me, that's really been the key. Like, he's had a clean pocket for so many of the big plays. Has he created offense? Yeah. Has he been better than the play call at times? Sure, that's happened. But by and large, the pocket, the distance between he and the pocket, so he's got a clean sight of vision to throw the ball down the field, has been really good. And I think that's a huge part of their success. Some of that's also play calling and play design in terms of setting them up for that, putting the offensive line in situations to be successful. So to me, in terms of Minnesota's offense, that's where it starts for them. They keep him clean, they're going to be fine.
Our guy Stanford Steve on our podcast talked about how he looked at that Darnold game with Detroit and said, I have no issues with it. I just figure you're going to have a bad game somewhere. He had it, got rid of it, and flushed it. But now he moves to an even bigger game against a guy in Matthew Stafford who's done this a lot. And I kiddingly call him the old gray beard. Actually, I'm not kidding. His beard's gray now. He's been at it for a while. But he's won a Super Bowl. He's been through this. How can he specifically stress a really good Vikings defense?
I think what's interesting about Stafford is he came into the league with just incredible, physical talent. Just had an absolute cannon for an arm and all of that. And I think what gets lost in it throughout all of his success is how good he is at the line of scrimmage. We talked about it with Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Drew Brees and all these quarterbacks, at the line of scrimmage, so good, taking control of it. Well, Stafford's probably as good as anybody in the game at that. And when you think about how that matches up with Minnesota, we've talked about Brian Flores, his aggressive nature. He'll hit you with an all-out blitz in the middle of the field, kind of out of nowhere. But it can get you, too. Live by the sword, die by the sword type of thing. And Stafford's ability to see it, because that gray beard has seen it all.
You're right.
And make you pay, I think is something to be concerned about if you're Minnesota.
I think there's an analogy about a pitcher, right, that could throw at 98, but he's not a thrower. He's learned to pitch, right? He's so cerebral on top of the arm talent, which he's still got, and he has seen it all. It'll be a fascinating matchup and a rematch at that, as we will cap off Wild Card Weekend on Monday night. It's the Vikings.
If you wouldn't mind wrapping around here, because Randy claims he doesn't have any glue. I don't have any glue. I think we're about to find out right now. I just have been dragging a wagon. Get a tight little. There's a bit of a wagon. Give us a little drag. Come on, give us a little. Hold on. Give us a little. Hold on. Let me just. Tell me about all the ingredients in guacamole.
So we have fresh lime juice, we have cilantro, and we have red onions.